On today's episode of Locked On Wild, which Wild players have been drafted and developed the best?
You're Locked On Wild, your daily podcast on the Minnesota Wild, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's happening, everybody? Welcome into another episode of Locked On Wild. We are your team every day, and we are your daily Minnesota Wild podcast. We thank you for making Locked On Wild your first listen each and every day. Make sure you hit that subscribe button, flip those notifications on so you don't miss out on any new episodes throughout the week. Today's episode of Locked On Wild is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app. Create an account and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. On today's episode of Locked On Wild, Isha Jahromi of the Sota Pod joins us as we take a look at the best draft and develop players the Minnesota Wild have had. My name is Seth Topal, your daily Minnesota Wild insider, and we have Isha Jahromi of the Sota Pod on with us here today during what I initially thought was going to be Prospect Week, what has turned into more crossover week. But hey, we're doing a little bit of both. And Isha is here for what we both have said is one of our favorite episodes of the week. The crossover between Locked On Wild and the Sota Pod. And we're going to have another fun one here today, Isha. How's it going?
It's going good, man. It's going good. Love talking prospects. Love opening up the vault and looking at, past players for the Wild. I did, unfortunately, read some of the comments in some of our last YouTube videos, and especially the Mount Rushmore one. And I think my favorite comment was, "This team sucks and they've always sucked. There's never been a Mount Rushmore." I'm like, yeah, but for what the team was, I feel like we chose some decent players there.
Yeah.
How are you going to disrespect Nick Backstrom? Come on.
Well, and I liked what Trav said. It's like, just because they haven't won anything doesn't mean you can't Mount Rushmore it. Yeah. We are in off-season mode here, and so it's just one of those fun things to talk about. But for today's show, we're keeping that topic of prospects going. And, the Wild have had no shortage of players that they've been able to draft that have maybe not been like the surefire first-round guys, which we'll talk about those guys here today a little bit. But there have been some real good examples of players that have been drafted by the Wilds, have been developed by the Wild, maybe took a little bit to get going when they first got to the NHL level, and have turned into just machines. And of course, I'm teeing it up for the first player I want to talk about here today, Isha, Joel Eriksson, because you look at where he was selected by the Minnesota Wild, and both of us rolling through Hockey DB to come up with the lists. Eriksson was drafted 20th overall in 2015. And we know the Joel Eriksson story pretty well. He came up. It took him a little while to get going when he first got to the NHL level, but man, it is hard to argue with what he has done over the last few seasons. I mean, 19 plus goals each of the last 4 seasons, 30 plus points each of the last 4 seasons. And the reason I say plus is because that 2020-2021 season where he had 19 goals and 30 points, that's the lowest mark he's had in these last 4 years by far. And not only the goal scoring, he was part of one of the most shut down lines in hockey 2 years ago with the Grief line. And so Joel Eriksson has turned into just a force. He is the number one center on this team, not by default, but because he has earned the opportunity and because he's that good. And so if you want to talk about draft and develop, Joel Eriksson is, I think, exhibit A as to the ability of it to work for an NHL team.
Yeah, and even in the 2019-20 season where he got 29 points, like he wasn't elevated into like a top role yet. And it was that year where we really got to see like, oh, damn, this guy is insanely athletic, has a gas tank for days. And we saw that shutdown ability really start to shine in the National Hockey League. And then they give him a bigger role the next year. And there it is, just like you mentioned.
Yeah, and it's my favorite part, I think, is you look at what Joel Eriksson has done throughout his career, and every season we ask ourselves, what is he going to do to improve? And every season he just finds a way to up it just a little bit. First 30-goal season this year, he had 64 points. He became John Hines' go-to center in every situation. And he didn't miss a beat in any of those situations until the unfortunate part was he got hurt in the second half of the season. And when he came back, the goal scoring dried up a little bit. But at one point he was on pace for like 35, 36 goals. And it just further underscores how important he's become to this team and the work that he puts in to get himself into position to be the number one center.
Yeah. And I think another pick that is either right there with Eriksson as a guy who the Wild have developed throughout his entire career and who is still one of the most underrated skaters, maybe not straight speed, but just skaters in the National Hockey League. That is Jonas Brodin.
I'm so glad you went
10th overall in 2011. A guy who, if you weren't like a hardcore, like Spoke Z draft nerd, you were kind of like, yeah, we've read his name. Yeah, we've seen him play, but it's not like he put up points overseas in the SHL. I mean, he only put up 8 points in 49 games, 4 points in 42 games. Like it wasn't like he was a world beater in points, and he still isn't in the National Hockey League, but he's, contributes enough. But it's his shutdown abilities, it's his ability to take away space. It's his ability to shut down McDavid when healthy. That has impressed me so much. And with the right D pairing, it can be such a great 1-2 punch, especially with him allowing and helping his more offensive-minded defense partner, who we've seen, with Dumba for so many years.
Yeah, with Matt Dumba, he was not a defensive defenseman by any means. And so Brodin was put in position to cover up those defensive deficiencies. But you said it right there. Like, go ask Connor McDavid how much he enjoys playing against Jonas Brodin. He has multiple times been held just completely off the board. And that's not an easy task for somebody who moves around the ice as much as Connor McDavid does. We saw in one of the games against Edmonton this past season where McDavid just that one breakaway goal that he had where he just skated past like 4 different Wild players and just completely turned on the afterburners. Jonas Brodin prevents stuff like that because of how good he is defensively. And
you know what's crazy, actually, because I have Hockey DB up right now, his career point total is 28 points in 69 games, and even less games and banged up this year. 62 games, he put up one shy of that in 27 points and had one more goal.
And it's funny too, because, and I'm not here to get into a Jared Spurgeon, Jonas Brodin debate, but we've seen over the last
they're different players, but
I'm just, the point I'm making is we have seen the Wild, I think, miss Jonas Brodin more when he's hurt because of what he brings to the table. And I mean, he is just an outstanding defenseman in the NHL. And that's a credit to, again, the work that he puts in and the work that he does, just like Joel Eriksson, the work he does to put himself in position to be as good as he is. This is just another, these are probably two of the best draft and develop picks that the Minnesota Wild have made. As we'll talk about here the rest of the show, there are certainly plenty of others, but
we can't even add Jared Spurgeon to this list because he was drafted by the Islanders, even though he was developed. Here, but he is not originally a Minnesota Wild draft pick. So, and he went and played overseas for a season as well, right? His path to the NHL is actually really, really cool. Kind of like Zuccarello's, although Zuccarello's, I mean, he didn't think he was going to come back for a little while. Yeah, and anytime you put up 2 points in 2 games with the Dallas Stars or whatever he did, you're doing things if you're Zuccarello. So I would say those are probably the 2 best examples of true draft and develop for the Minnesota Wild, but there are plenty of other players that have
obviously gone through the same road. And I want to talk about one in particular because people may look at this list and say, well, how can you not lead off with this guy? We'll talk about Kirill Kaprizov and his path to the Minnesota Wild as we continue today's episode of Locked On Wild after this. Today's episode of Locked On Wild is brought to you by Game Time. We are right in the middle of the MLB season. The Minnesota Twins trying to keep up with the Cleveland Guardians in the American League Central. There's nothing better than heading to Target Field on a bright, sunny day, going and getting one of those outfield bleacher seats, or even, I didn't know this until recently, Target Field has a pontoon in right field that you can sit in for games. Yeah, they have pontoon seats that you can sit in right field. And if you want to take advantage of those seats, Game Time is a great way to do just that. Not only does Game Time allow you the opportunity to pick your seats and save a little bit when you select a section, Game Time will choose your seats and you can save even more. But prices for tickets actually go down the closer you get to the date of the game. All that with Game Time's lowest price guarantee. If you find seats that are cheaper, Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference. So take the guesswork out of buying MLB tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. Welcome back to today's episode of Locked On Wild. Once again, we thank you for making Locked On Wild your first listen each and every day. If you haven't had a chance yet to check out our Sunday live streams, make sure to do so. Right at noon, we will take air talking about Dean Evison heading to Columbus and a major announcement coming as well. So make sure to check out Sunday, noon, right here on YouTube. Isha, let's get back to the discussion here with draft and develop players. I wanted to talk about Kirill Kaprizov, even though he's not going to top the two players that we just talked about.
Because, see, honestly, I'm just gonna say this right now. I don't even think he deserves to be on this list because he didn't develop in the Wild system. He developed in Russia, became a superstar over there, Olympic gold medalist, KHL Gregorian Cup champion, and then came over here primed and ready to absolutely dominate.
Yeah, this is exactly what I was hoping for, because I'm of the same belief that spending all that time in the KHL is developing in the KHL. And then once he came here, he was just ready to rock. So, yeah.
And it wasn't like he just developed a couple years there, had some good seasons. He was one of the best players in that league, which is, say what you want about the AHL. It's a hard league to play in North America. And it's probably like the third or fourth best league. The KHL is the second best league in the world. And I don't think there's any ifs, ands, or buts about it.
No. And that's where pretty much all of his skill set came from, was all those years in the KHL. And it was contentious, wondering if he was going to even come over here by the time his KHL time was done. And then he finally did, but straight to the NHL.
The cost, or the rubles to USD, might have had a little bit of
probably swayed him
and I don't think he's like, I don't think he agrees a lot with what the government is doing there. He can't like, he's less outspoken than Panarin, but I mean, there was a chance where Billy Guerin had to actually like step in and help get him to North America, right? So it wasn't like, Ovechkin, where he can just fly private jet and land on friggin' Putin's, runway. It's a little bit different.
It took a minute for that to
it took some strings to pull.
I'm gonna go to another name that was a little bit more of a draft and develop, but not quite the success level that Joel Eriksson and Jonas Brodin had. How about Jason Zucker?
That's another good one.
Was selected in the second round in the 2010 NHL draft. He played at the University of Denver for a couple of seasons, then went to the Houston Aeros. I forget all the time that before it was the Iowa Wild, it was the Houston Aeros. And so he went there, got acclimated at the NHL level. One of the weirdest stat lines you'll ever see in his his first full season, 2014-2015, 21 goals, 5 assists. And
just so a goal scoring finishing machine that year.
He's just a straight shooter. I'm going to put Zucker on here because, we got the chance to see over his years with Minnesota, got the chance to see like him really turn into a prominent goal scorer, and it capitalized with him playing in 2017-2018, a full 82 games, 33 goals, 31 assists, 64 total points. And so, as he put in more and more years, he got more comfortable, and a guy now who was a piece that Nashville went out to try to acquire for the sole reason of scoring goals. So
yeah. And I also like, I would put Matt Dumba on that same tier just because it's not like he came right from junior and then developed in the Minnesota Wild, like on the Minnesota Wild roster. He developed in their system. He had one more year of junior, just like Zucker had one more year of college. And then he had a cup of coffee in Houston and played 13 games with the Wild, went back to junior for the last 26 games. And then split 2014-15 with the NHL and the Iowa Wild, where he played actually more games in the NHL than he did in Iowa. Then once 2015 rolled around, he was a full-time, Wild player. So I would kind of put Zucker and Dumba in that like same tiers. Like they definitely weren't like straight up developed on the Wild roster, but they didn't take too much time before they hit the ground running.
No, it was a couple of seasons in the Iowa system, and then they were up and polishing their skills from there. I have three that are in my opinion another tier up though, and I want to hear your thoughts about them. That's Brett Burns, Mikko Koivu, and Marian Gaborik. Now I know I know only one of them was a Minnesota Wild lifer, so maybe we should have put Koivu in the Brodin and Ek tier. But regardless, they pretty much came right over, and I know Burns played one full season in Houston, but that was 04-05. Like he came 2003, 2004 and played right after his Brampton season, if I'm not mistaken, played 30 some games with the Wild. So he actually played a big chunk of that year. Yeah, and let's start with Burns, because I like that one, because Burns really, like when he started, the Wild didn't really know what they had with him. Like, was he a winger? Was he a defenseman? Yeah,
he can play both.
What are you going to get from a guy like that? And then, as his career unfolded, we started to see a little bit of it right at the end of his Minnesota Wild tenure, but full bore took off when he went to San Jose, and he turned into one of the premier offensive defensemen in the NHL. But
Pierre-Marc Bouchard came right into the NHL as well, and the only reason he spent a year in Iowa or with Houston was the same reason as Burns, the lockout.
Yeah, those I like that. Putting them in that tier above, say, Dumba and Zucker, because
they were kind of back and forth for a little bit. They didn't go all right, you're developing in the NHL, which is tough to do. And that's why Boldy's not in that tier either, because he was drafted out of the U.S. development program, then went to college, right?
Right. And, for Koivu, I think he belongs in that same tier too, because he did get one season with Houston, then right to the NHL, but it took him a little bit to kind of find some offensive footing. And so, I would put Koivu maybe 1B on that, in that kind of tier, below Eriksson, Ek, and Brodin, but I would say still above Zucker and Dumba. But I think he's still, premier defensive center. We've had the debate a trillion times. The reason that he gets as much flack as he does is because the Wild tried to put him in a spot that he didn't belong as 1C. If he was just a 2C his entire career, I don't think anybody bats an eye. But
Yeah, I just because that was the only good center that they really had, and he was a two-way center. He wasn't he was more of a shutdown guy and a distributor than he was a guy who could do it all, right?
Correct. But still, he developed into a very, very good center. So I'll put him 1B. And who was the third player you said again?
I said Gabrick.
Yeah.
He came right in and hit the ground running. Came right in from overseas and just hit the ground running.
Maybe Gabrick needs to go in the 1 tier too. Although, again, but
he's not a lifer. That's my only thing. Yeah. Which is why I would have put Burns in there as well. But it's like he wasn't a lifer. They were here for a while, like a good chunk of their career. But no, he's not a lifer, so I got to put him down. I got to put him a peg down.
Yeah, put him between Dumba Zucker and Eriksson Brodin, because he did develop into a best scorer until Kirill Kaprizov was him. Yep. But he was number 1 overall pick, is just on the roster the next year regardless.
Yeah,
like you don't mess around with that. So these are some of the names that have drafted by the Wilds, have developed at various levels through the system. I want to talk about some of the more recent players, Isha, to finish, and I'm going to throw out my listener question. Which player do you think, between Joel Eriksson and Jonas Brodin, is the best developed player drafted by the Minnesota Wild? Which one do you think is better right now? Let us know in the comments. And we'll finish today's episode of Locked On Wilds after this. Today's episode of Locked On Wild is brought to you by FanDuel. Folks, playoffs are way in the rearview mirror. We are in the midst of the MLB season, which means that there aren't a ton of games going on right now, which kind of bums me out because I love sports more than anybody. And this is where FanDuel can help, because FanDuel is going to be giving customers a boost or a bonus daily all summer long. That's right. There is something for everyone every day all summer long. So just head over to FanDuel.com and start making the most out of your summer. FanDuel, official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball. Final segment of today's episode of Locked On Wild. Once again, we thank you for making Locked On Wild your first listen each and every day. Make sure to check out all of the wonderful offerings of the Sota Pod. Isha, Liam Ohgren on the latest edition of Fellowship of the Rink.
What a beauty. What a beauty.
I cannot wait, because we're going to talk about him in a second. I cannot wait to see him get an opportunity, because he seems like a kid that just really has a good head on his shoulders. And it doesn't matter which player, like, you just take your pick of these prospects that are coming up for the Minnesota Wild. Every single one of them is like Riley Heidt, Liam Ohgren. They're like, oh no, I'm making the team.
Yeah.
Like, I love that all these guys are brimming with confidence that they're going to do whatever they need to do, and they're going to put pressure on the team to make a decision.
Bro, how about Kiviharu, who's still like years out, and he's like, the steal of the draft, of the draft. No, we have some awesome players in the cabinet, in the prospect pool. And I know there's a lot of negative Nellies out there who listen to your show and mine, but like, and they're not prospect nerds like us. So a lot of them don't care because they're not in the Wild. So it doesn't matter, but like, it is really, really cool to see.
Yeah. It leads to, 3, 4, 5 years down the road. A lot of these guys are going to be on the roster and are going to be making major impacts for this Minnesota Wild team. So let's talk about some of these guys, because this list that we've put together, Eriksson and Brodin on top, you've got guys like, let's talk about Jesper Wallstedt for a second, because Jesper's going to count. He's going to count for a true draft and develop guy that could potentially be, all the way up to the top of this list, because spent a couple of seasons in Iowa,
Sorry, Leskovar is going to be at the top of the list. If you know, you know.
Great callback.
Your face too when you're like, who the hell is going to be your number one? Sorry, I just had to.
Oh, I was going in circles when we got to the top of your list, and I'm like, we've already gone through all the names. Who's left?
That one highlight alone, him laying that kid out, then just being like, come here, enforcer. Like, let's go down.
Very worth it. Like that sold me entirely. So, Jesper's going to be a true draft and develop guy because he spent a couple of seasons in Iowa.
Yep.
And now this year, there's still questions as to what's going to happen with the NHL goalie situation.
Yeah, they have two goalies. So it's like he's going to be the relief guy, not do we call him up and give him a shot? No. It's you are the third string, but you're going to be playing in the minors until we need you.
Well, and it's going to be interesting to see how this plays out because if they keep Gus and they keep Fleury, what do you do to try to get him to a particular level of starts? Do you bring him with on road trips and say, okay, we're going to give Gus a breather. We're going to throw Jesper in for a start here and there. We could see stuff like that too, as opposed to just like strict filling in for injuries. But the key thing here is that, this is going to be a further piece of the development is the starts at the NHL level. We saw 3 of them last year. I'd imagine, depending on how things play out, we see more of them this year. And then next year, here's the keys. Keys to the Corvette are in your hands. Go as fast as you'd like, but be wary. There might be some speed bumps.
I'm on a different page, and your chat's going to hate me for this. So come at me with the negative comments. Come on, throw on the gloves. Let's go. There are 2 goalies on this team. Yeah. He's not going to get those. He's not going to get those games, Seth. He's going to be relief and relief only because you don't just sit your 1B in Gustafsson or your 1A in however you wanted 1A, 1B, whatever they are. You don't just sit them if you are really trying to make the playoffs and win games in the National Hockey League. This isn't a throwaway season. I know for a lot of people, they maybe want it to be, but there's others who are like, no, like go for it. The team is good enough to make some sort of impact and maybe sneak in the playoffs. And you think Billy Guerin's just going to be like, oh, this is one more year of whatever before Fleury retires. If they put it this way, if they wanted Jesper to get his reps this year, his true reps, Fleury would not be coming back.
Yeah, that's true.
No ifs, ands, or buts. So I, on the other hand, think relief is fine. And yeah, is he going to get torched in some of these relief games? He might, because he won't be used to those NHL shots. He won't be practicing with the team. So he might get starts in one night, or he might actually play a lot better, which he did in his second and third game with the team. I think you might have to edit that out. You freaking make him the bona fide starter in Iowa. And I know he played 45 games last year. Dude, give him as many starts as he can handle. Give him the hardest back-to-backs. Really be like, here's a grueling schedule for you in Iowa. We're gonna give you as much time against the best teams. Maybe make sure that he plays those games against the best teams in the AHL, the best shooters, right? Like plan that ahead of time and make sure that, okay, you give, the backups who you want to get reps in at the AHL level anyways, give them maybe some of the easier matchups, the easier teams in the AHL, and just make sure that, and this is strategic, make sure that Wallstedt gets the best teams to play against in the AHL and then just have them as the relief. Cause I just don't think it's a realistic scenario to be like, hey, Gus, hey, Fleury, we're just going to, especially Fleury in his last season, we're just going to sit you because we have this young guy up. It's like, no. And I've been watching this sport and you have for our, our whole lives. That's just not how it works with a young backup coming in. The young backup comes in and plays a fraction of the games in his first year behind a goalie who might be, who whether he's a veteran or not, and next year, whether Gus is on this team or not, let's just say, because Fleury's going to retire, let's just say it is Gus. Gus is going to get overworked next year regardless, right?
Yeah.
And if Jesper shows that he can split the load, then sweet, that's a good problem to have. But they're going to ease him in slowly because you do not want to hamper this guy's development in this next step. And so far, he's checked every box from Swedish Junior to SHL to AHL. I think this year's the last year in the AHL where it's like, you are the man. Like, you are the man. Let's give you all the hard matchups. Let's give you a grueling schedule. And you are the relief guy still. Like, it's not like we're going to, because of that, we're not going to give you those games. And let's see if we can handle it.
Yeah. And last year, the interesting thing with Iowa was pretty much the only games that they won were the games that he was in net, because you had Zane McIntyre, and I don't know the exact stats, but I want to say he was something like 3-14.
Let me check here.
It was Jesper.
14, yeah, dude. Yeah, it's horrendous. Jesper won 22 of the games.
Yeah, and he won those games with a D-core that was, figuring it out as they went on the topic of development.
Yeah. And again, we're really diving into the minutiae here, but I hope Matt Hendricks works with the coaches and goes, make sure that when we play, the Hershey Bears, who are always a good team, or the Coachella, or all these Chicago, all these top age, make sure, schedule permitting us, that he's in there. So that he can get the best shooters, that he can get the closest thing to an NHL team. And then when he gets the call-up, he gets the call-up.
Yeah, and the thing to keep in mind here, too, because we saw a little bit of this last year, is there just were it didn't feel like there were any contingency plans at any position for the Wild last year. But like you said with the goalie situation, if Gus gets hurt, if Fleury gets hurt, we know that Jesper is the one that's going to be coming up to take that spot. Yeah. But yeah, I was more so just trying to kind of put out a scenario where hey, we've got an 8-game road trip. We're going to bring Jesper with as insurance so that we don't have to try to call somebody up if somebody gets hurt, kind of a thing. But
for sure.
Yeah, it's if Philip Gustafsson and Marc-Andre Fleury are both still on the roster come the first day of the season, that's 100% how this is going to go. And so it's just further development for Jesper and his opportunity. This doesn't change his opportunity because it's still right there down the road. It's just
they're not wasting years. He's 21, dude. He's 21. And if Gustafsson gets traded, well, then they have to find a top goalie next year, right? And they don't just grow on trees, right? You still have to pay. You have to overpay on the free agency, or you have to trade something to bring one in. It's not that easy. A lot of people are making this sound or oversimplifying this. The best case scenario is Gustafsson, who didn't even play that bad last year, but wasn't as good as his first year with the Wild. Best case scenario, he returns to his first year form, and you roll with him as your 1A. Or just your one, not even 1A, you're one, and Jesper, your true backup next to you when Fleury retires. That is the best case scenario.
Yep.
And then at 23, the year after next, hopefully Jesper takes Gustafsson's spot, and you can then move on from him, and then you see what you have. If you needed a 1B, you go out and find a 1B. If one of your developing guys is ready, like that kid who played in the queue from Finland, then awesome, right? But no, they're already fast tracking him. Right. Yeah. And it's great that he's, like I said, that he's checking all the boxes, but man, hockey is one of those sports that's so different from the NFL.
Yeah.
Guys don't just come in and play. You have to develop them properly. And that goes full circle to, what we've been talking about this whole show in development.
And just a quick finish here. It would be far worse to push him too quickly and have him just fizzle out. Between the two, having him come up a little later than we expected him, a season and a half later than we had anticipated or wanted to see him, that's the better approach than saying, okay, here you go. And all of a sudden he starts stacking up starts where he gets shelled and it's confidence is gone. So patience is the key. But Isha, thanks for the time.
Hey,
as always, we appreciate having you on, and I look forward to our crossover on the Sota Pod coming up for Monday. It's
going to be a fun one. I'm excited.
You always cook up good stuff for me, so I'm excited to see where we go. But listeners,
it's going to be sizzling. It's going to be sizzling.
There we go. Hit that like button. Hit that subscribe button. Turn those notifications on so you don't miss out on any new episodes throughout the week. You can find new episodes of Locked On Wild every Monday through Friday as part of the Locked On Podcast Network.